Welcome to Get Your Sit Together with Sarah Dixon and Rebecca Hoffman, where paws hit the ground running and training gets real. Whether you're teaching sit, stay, or figuring it out along the way, we've got you covered with tips, tricks, and tales to make dog training a breeze. So grab a treat, sit, stay, and listen. Here are your hosts, Sarah and Rebecca.
Hello.
Hi, Sarah. I don't know if I'm quite used to our intro yet. I feel like I gotta do something with my hands.
We're both having coffee. I think it's been that kind
Yes.
of way. Yeah.
Happy morning.
I didn't sleep. Well, I fell asleep, but I woke up early, and then at like 5:30, I was just like, I give up. I'm gonna get up, which was good because my employee texted me at 6 and was like, "Hey, I can't come to work," so I had to go.
Yeah, you were there for that. Yeah, I've had 2 nights in a row of bathroom blunders, not for myself, for the dogs. I've had bathroom blunders. The dogs. The first one was a foster, and then last night was Cooper. Cooper's struggling with the rain again, so we gotta go back to management.
They're sleepy.
Yeah, but we're still doing our jobs, and we're still here to talk about dogs. So, with that being said, last episode we talked a lot about how what kinds of things affect behavior, and the reigning theme was health and how to check on health factors and how it might affect stress and how that affects behavior and so on and so forth. Today we want to move on and we want to talk about development phases and how that affects behavior, and we might as well start from the very beginning. So if you want to kind of take the lead on this a little bit and start where you were thinking of starting.
Right. So first thing that I'll kind of summarizes the kind of 4 major developmental periods we're going to cover. So there's puppy, which is like generally kind of considered up to about 5 months. And we'll talk about puppy first. Adolescence, which kind of is 5 months, 6 months, sort of starts there. You'll kind of notice a bit of a change in your puppy's behavior and they'll start to act differently. And adolescence lasts like anywhere from 18 to 24 months. And then around 2 to 3 years is kind of what we would call social maturity. So that's when your dog kind of really becomes an adult, their brain finishes developing, and it's going to vary sort of depending on breed and bloodlines and individual dog and when that kind of happens. And then the other one is coming into seniorhood, which a lot of people don't realize in dogs. Actually, you can start having some of those aging changes starting around 7, sometimes even a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
So let's start with puppy, because we all love puppies.
We all love puppies.
So I think one of the things with puppies that a lot of people who get a dog that like are not super experienced dog owners don't realize is they are a lot of work. I like to borrow a mantra from Kathy Callahan, and she has a book that is absolutely amazing. Anybody who is training puppies or raising puppies should get this book. You have got a baby, an infant from another planet, right?
Yeah.
So you have literally taken an infant from a completely different species, culture. It's an alien baby into your home. We need to be patient with them, right?
Yes.
People have a lot of the time really, really high expectations of puppies. They expect them to be able to be house trained immediately, to understand what we want of them immediately, to do what we want because we ask them to, when really like it takes years to get a well-trained dog. It can take a couple of months to get a puppy fully house trained, even up to a year old. Crate training takes patience, and they're infants. Like they really can't be left alone all day. So you need to have a plan in place of, having somebody come to check on them and take them out, or maybe consider adopting an older dog. There's lots of great older dogs looking for homes if that's not something that your schedule can accommodate. Puppies chew things. They like babies, like human babies. They explore the world with their mouths. So they're going to put things in their mouths. That's something that you have to teach them.
They literally don't know anything. They don't know anything.
They have no control over their bladder, their bowels, and their emotions. They literally are infants, right?
Yes.
So think about human infants and how helpless they are. You've got one that is a lot more mobile but also like can't really have any impulse control or any physical control over their body. So you have to be patient with them.
Yeah, and that is definitely, when we talk about puppies, the other thing that I generally will let people know. Like, I try to make a lot of analogies to like babies, because people tend to, but not everybody I work with has had children, so sometimes those analogies can get lost. But the big thing too to remember with puppies is that their development cycles are a lot shorter than the human.
Yes.
So they are literally changing from week to week. And when I offer like puppy packages, I generally try to push my clients into meeting twice a week, because we're going to triage on one lesson, and then we're going to plan on the next lesson. And then the next week, we're going to do the exact same thing, because it's going to change again. Right. There are some levels of expectation. If you know what breed of dog you have, what the parents were like, you can talk to the breeder and so on and so forth. But also know that puppies are also going to vary even within the litter. I just know, like, the last experience that I had with a litter of puppies, which is Fiverr, which was almost 7 years ago now. I can't believe it was so long ago. Every single one of those dogs was different. Not only like their coats different, but their personalities were different. So those are all things to keep in mind too, is that, you know, you may go into it with an idea, but it most likely will change. So
what are the most common things that you find pet owners call you in to help with those puppies under 5 months?
Potty training is usually the big one, but some of the not the outliers, some of the other ones that I get calls for are whining, can't be alone, whining, and puppy biting. Puppy biting is the biggest one that I get the biggest call for, because they have sharp little puppy teeth, and puppy teeth hurt. They hurt, and they have no sense of what their mouths are really doing or how much pressure they're putting on, and they're sharp for a reason. So those are the two biggest ones that I get calls for. Is totally normal. Right. And we talk a lot about like redirection, building up. You know, you have to remember that these puppies came from where they were spending 24/7 with their litter mate and their mom, and then suddenly they're in a new environment. And, you know, depending on who your breeder was, they might not understand what a crate is. They might not even understand what true litter or potty training is. And then puppy biting is also really normal. That's how they play. That's how they explore. So developing strategies to not only manage that, but redirect it, and then help them grow out of it. Dogs don't naturally grow out of it. They grow into behaviors. So we have to strategize to help them kind of grow into appropriate outlets for it.
Right. I think the nipping is like a really, really, really big one. And like some of the techniques that I like to also use is like, this comes from, again, Kim Brophy's legs. To get a really, really big stuffed toy, if you don't have the ability to get your puppy like playing with the other dogs on the regular, a really, really big stuffed toy. So some people will use those like Melissa and Doug fake dogs that you can get off of Amazon, but we also just recommend people to buy like a big Tuffy toy. And you actually play with it with your dog, like they wrestle with the toy and you move it around and interact with them like it's another dog. And so that's a really good way for the puppy to bite and wrestle on something and interact with you, but they're not biting on you. And then if they bite on you with young puppies, usually a really, really good reaction is just to react like how another dog would if they bit too hard, and just like kind of yelp. And most puppies will go, oh, geez, I'm sorry. Like, thank you for the feedback. I will maybe be a little bit more considerate about where I put my mouth on you. Once they get a little bit older, I find sometimes the yiping can like amp them up. But if they're like 8, 9, 10 weeks, usually they're like, oh, geez, I'm actually really sorry. So as soon as they put teeth on you and you feel pressure, like do a yipe and back off. But the big toy that they can wrestle with is like super, super helpful. And then like some other things is thinking about like, what are the situations, like, are there certain situations where your puppy is getting nippy? Like maybe they're not getting enough naps. So you see this too, right? Is like people do not realize that puppies won't always rest themselves when they need to. So making sure that you're kind of putting your puppy in for a nap about every 2 hours. And sometimes like in a quiet area away from you, like maybe with a Kong or a chew stick for a little while. And they might not relax unless they're kind of in a little sensory deprivation zone. But making sure that they get that regular rest. If they don't,
that's a big one. That's a big one that I have to combat too, because we get a lot of people who are like, oh, how do I tire out my puppy? And I'm like, you don't. If you try to treat it like a 3-year-old that you want to go jogging with, you're going to hurt it. Like, it's ups and downs all day long.
A lot of puppies, when they get overtired, they're terrible, right? And then people are like, I need to exercise it more. But like, if you might need to kind of like help them wind down. So usually what I do with puppies is I kind of go, okay, you're coming out of your crate. Let's go out for a potty break. Once you've done your business, we're going to come inside. I'm going to interact with you. We're going to play. We're going to do training. And you kind of do that for about an hour. And then it's like, okay, now it's time for you to go like in your pen right beside me or on a tether right beside me. You can have your toys. You can have your chews. And I'm right here. Maybe a licky mat, maybe a bone or a frozen Kong or a Kong or something like that. Something for you to kind of like soothe yourself and wind down. And then an hour, or if they fall asleep, then I pop them in the crate. And again, I'm right there. Just let them kind of fall asleep and try not to kind of leave them. And if you kind of do that early crate training where you're putting them in the crate where they're already sleepy, and they do their nap and then they come out, it helps a lot instead of just trying to be like, okay, you're going in your crate and I'm going to leave you, right? The crate gets poisoned really quickly. So if you do, you do have to leave them, I like to set up a pen so that kind of a pen, they have a little bit more space, or maybe you've gated them in the kitchen and that's sort of their room and the crate's inside and it's really comfy for them. But kind of building up their tolerance and comfort level with the crate before you start using it for confinement helps a lot.
100%.
The other recommendation that Kathy does that I really like, so she kind of is the one who recommends, like, gate off your kitchen and puppy proof it. And the puppy kind of is in the kitchen when you're first training. You want to it doesn't have to be the kitchen. It's a room that, you're in a lot that has easy access to outside that can be puppy proof really easily, but they have that space. There are crates in there. You can put a pen in there too. And then that way you can get them outside to go potty really easily. And then if they're getting too rangy, you can just leave the room, and you can also practice like waiting at the gate and rewarding calm behavior before you come in. And then I think we were talking about biting and we got onto naps. And then, the other thing with biting is just always have a toy on you. And if they start biting, just be like, and redirect them onto the toy, because they mouth for everything. Right? And
they do.
Eating worse too. So just always having a toy with you, and if they start to get mouthy, just like, here, chew on the toy.
Rotating toys is a big one for me. Like, hey, bring out 5 toys, and at the end of the week, rotate them out for 5 new toys, and then, have like a rotation going. The other one that I will sometimes do for puppies, I never thought about the whole like big toy thing, but I'll do really, really long ropes. And my strategy for that is that if they start to come up the rope, like you have all this other rope, you just let that go. You can go grab the other end until later you can teach them targeting and stuff. So like a really big, like soft felt, puppy safe toy is one that I agree with as well. And then the other thing that I'll do sometimes too is if I've got a puppy who's yelping or biting and you yelp, because I get a lot of people who then become afraid of their dog, so they just exude all of this, oh my god, and then that emboldens a lot of puppies. Tuck your hands, like bring your fingers in, tuck them, and then I will like cross my hands, and then I'm just like, I don't want to play. I'll throw my head up, but I don't make eye contact, and I'm like doing like, it's almost like a social timeout where I just completely freeze, but I want to make sure that my hands are safe. So I will literally tuck my hands into sort of my, like crossing my arms and tuck my fingers into them. And then I just take my head out of the way and I just go, And like the energy that I mentally want my clients to exude is, oh, this is not cool, and I don't want to play like that, right? So like you don't, like your dog doesn't understand English, but they do understand body language and they understand tone. So like if you just kind of take a moment to be like, that's not cool, dude. I don't like that. I don't want to play with you when you're like that. And then quickly, once they calm down, then you can re-engage with them. Don't hold on to that feeling. Re-engage with them as soon as they comply. Then like you're good to go. So that's another strategy that I like to use. It's just that idea of stillness. But I got a lot of older clients, and I'm starting to get older too. So my fingers are starting to get sensitive in certain areas, and I don't have loose skin yet, but I have a lot of hangnails and I bite my nails. So tuck your fingers in and cross your arms and just pretend like you're not interested in playing with them anymore. That's another strategy.
Exactly how other dogs teach puppies how to use their mouths is if they are too much, they will like give them verbal feedback. and then they ignore them.
Yeah, and they go, I don't want to play with you if you're going to be like that.
Stop it.
It's a great strategy for resource guarding, too, for some types of resource guarding, which we'll talk about in another episode. One analogy that I wanted to revisit real quick before we go into adolescence is the whole idea of giving your dog plenty of naps. And one of my favorite analogies to kind of use to kind of get people to understand this is you still see children in Disneyland having a meltdown.
Yes. You might see me in Disneyland having a meltdown. Let's be honest, okay?
Yeah, I feel like as adults, though, we can kind of control our meltdowns a little bit easier. Like if you're seeing the toddler who's like in 12 o'clock in the afternoon, who's in their stroller strapped down, just going, and I was like, oh, that kid needs a nap, Like some kids just pass out and they're fine, and other kids like ramp up, and puppies are 100% the same. If your puppy is ramping up and all of their needs have been met and they've been out for a while, they probably need a nap.
I want to talk quickly about puppy biting myth that I think is really important, and then we can move on unless you have anything else to add. But I just was thinking about it that Dexter just unplugged my computer. One of the things that I just wanted to bring up is don't use physical corrections for your puppy for biting. So there's a myth that that's what the mother dog does. But if you actually watch good mother dogs correct their puppies, they ignore them. And what they do is they move away, or they get wiggly and playful with them to kind of change their energy. It's really neat to watch, but it's really, really rare for a mother dog to bite or pin her puppies. If you see that, it's generally a mother that's actually a little bit aggressive. Even when they're weaning, I've seen mothers wean puppies and they just get all wiggly and move away. They're like, hey, we're not going to nurse right now, right? They just they get the puppies chasing them and they get the puppies playing. That's how they redirect them. It's really, really neat to see. But that's this whole idea of I have a lot of people will grab the puppy's mouth or scruff them or pin them. That can actually cause your puppy to become aggressive towards you. So that's why using the technique of ouch, hey, and then that social timeout is closer to actually how a dog would do it and closer to how the mother dog would do it. So that whole myth of you have to be the alpha and that's how the mother is not really correct at all. So
no, it's not.
About physically correcting your puppy for biting.
Yeah. Yeah, no, good point. All right, so let's talk about adolescent behavior, because this is people, tend to forget that puppies are puppies, and then their little dogs start to look like adult dogs, kind of, sort of. They get a little gangly, they get a little growth spurt, but then their behavior starts to kind of change, usually pretty dramatically too, not in a negative way, just different. So a lot of that usually comes in and around 5.5, 6 months. Usually once the dog starts to lose their teeth, they're getting into teenagerhood. And we'll see
kind of go into that sexual maturity. So they're getting their hormones starting to come in.
Hormones are kicking in. They're turning into gnarly 13-year-olds who are I'm an adult. I know what I'm doing. I don't need you anymore. They're exploring their environment. They're like, you taught me sit. I know sit better than you. And they blow you off, right? So we reach that point where they start to get real pushy. They push boundaries. They ignore us a little bit more. Their hormones are driving them. They're probably a little uncomfortable too, because they're going through a growth spurt. So, their back legs are way longer than their front legs, and their head's smaller than their chest. It should smaller. Teenage puppies are the most awkward looking dogs, especially labs and boxers and stuff. I'm like, does any piece of you match at all?
And talk about people having high expectations for puppies. Then the puppy starts to look like an adult, and the expectations for the adolescent are really, really high. When in fact,
really high.
You brought this up already. Their brain is not finished development until 2 to 3 years old. So are really
they're still a baby dog.
They're still a baby. We're not an infant anymore, but we're still a baby. They're like a toddler. That's kind of the equivalent. Yeah. They still have really poor emotional regulation, really poor impulse control. They're impulsive. The hormones can definitely make them kind of change the way they interact with other dogs. They might become more interested in the environment because they've got all these new drives that are like, oh, hey, you know, smells like other dogs over here. That's really interesting.
Things are waking up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So they definitely get a lot more interested in the environment. The other thing that happens, like the shift from puppy to adolescence, is like with puppies, definitely under 16 weeks, they're very open to new experiences. So that's when you want to be getting them out and like making sure that they're seeing the world, that they're kind of exposed to a lot of different looking people, you know, vehicles, environments that you want to be able to take your puppy and or your adult dog and have them comfortable with. You know, meeting dogs and having good interactions with solid dogs. Not necessarily meeting everybody, but seeing the world, right?
Yes.
And you have to do that carefully because they're not quite fully vaccinated. So taking them, you know, like to the supermarket parking lot or like into stores where it's dog friendly, you know, on surfaces that aren't going to really hold viruses. And puppy classes are really good because they're sanitized. Because you really only have like those first couple of months to really do that. And then once they hit adolescence, they're sort of like, okay, I'm going to start to be a lot more closed off to new experiences. And it's not that you want to stop taking them places, but you're really not in that sponge phase, right? So you might start to see that your puppy who was previously really friendly might now show some reservations about certain stimuli, right? Like they might not be as social to people. They might be a little bit, you know, maybe they were a little bit nervous about something before and now they start barking at it, right? When you're out walking. Yeah. That's really common to see as well. They start to try different behavioral strategies. Common to see kind of dogs where puppies start to show maybe a bit of territorial behavior where they're growling when people come around the house and things like that. So that's all pretty normal. And like with adolescents, a lot of this stuff you just kind of want to like, it's really counterintuitive for a lot of people, but you have to just kind of like back off and like don't try to push through it because their brain is just trying new neural pathways, right? And I made this mistake with Dexter where he was like really worried about men with beards. So I'm like, well, let's get a man with a beard around and I'll give him a lot of treats. And Dexter, 14 years later, still hates this guy.
Sure. Yeah.
He's okay with other men with beards now, but it totally imprinted on him. Whereas with Quill, when she went through kind of those weird little sensitive periods where her brain was like, you know, starting to form new neural connections, and she was like, I don't know about that guy across the street. I just was like, okay, you know what? This week we're not going to go people watching, or we're going to people watch from, you know, even further away where you can be comfortable and relaxed watching people. I didn't let anybody like pet her or interact with her for a week or two, and then she would be fine. Right?
Yeah, and fear phases happen in the early stages of puppyhood, and then it just becomes a little bit more pronounced in the adolescent stages.
It's do some wild stuff, and it's just brain rewiring. So just back off.
Exactly, and the best thing you can do in those moments is exactly like what you just did. It's just like, don't make a big deal out of it. Back off. Take a few days. Stay at home. Work on basic obedience if you want. Like, you just don't make a big deal of it. If you make a big deal of it, then their brain is going to go, I knew there was something here.
Right.
You're making a big deal of this. I knew there was something here.
Especially with certain dogs that are primed to really be sensitive to your emotions and your reactions, right?
Yes.
Like, a lot of dogs get labeled as reactive when really they're just having a moment. And then people totally change the way that they think about them and handle them. And like, you know, they might have gotten out of that phase with backing off and just supportive training. Like, I'll just tell kind of an analogy is like my dog Quill is very territorial, and like I saw it very young. It's not unexpected genetically. They're supposed to be protective of their property. But with dogs who are territorial, it takes a little while for them to figure out how to watch their handler for, is this somebody who's invited into our house?
Yes.
And if you just let people come in and don't manage your dog, then they're just patterning to be aggressive and reactive when people come in the house. So what I did for her whole adolescence was meet people outside, let her meet them on neutral territory, because literally in my driveway, she's perfectly fine, and then we'd come in together. And then I would just sit and I would let her relax, and she'd sit with me on leash, and I'd give her treats. And when she was calm, I'd let her go meet people. And within 5 minutes, she was like, okay, we're friends. Now that she's turned 3, she is a lot more discerning. She's a lot better trained. So I can put her in a stay and I can bring someone in. She holds her stay. She watches my body language and she goes, oh, okay, this is somebody that mom is letting in the house.
Yeah.
She's family friendly. But it took just managing that until her brain grew up. And like literally you can see changes in them at like 2, 2.5, 3, where they just start making better decisions.
Yes. If you've done the correct amount of management, yes. Because again, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier about puppies. They don't grow out of behaviors. They grow into behaviors if it works for them.
So management is really important. And when we talk about management is using kind of your environmental setups to prevent the dog from learning bad habits. So that's where like crate and pen and tethering comes in. So you're not just letting your puppy like have a free-for-all and destroy your furniture and steal items and chew them. If you're not watching them, they're somewhere safe where they can't get into trouble. And then even with your adolescents, like you're going to see some of that stuff show up and you have to go, okay, my dog can't handle people coming in the house right now. Let's try a different tactic. Let's meet them outside. We can go for a little walk even and then come in together, right? So they're not patterning that behavior of being reactive every time somebody comes in. Because like you said, they're not going to grow out of it if they're practicing that behavior all the time. So not allowing them to go through those motions is really, really, really important. And that's where you have to kind of, try to be one step ahead of your dog, which is really hard. Have to be proactive, right? And what I find always with my dogs is I'm like, oh, okay, that's a thing that hasn't happened before. And I'm like, all right, well, I'll brush that off. And then it happens again. And I'm like, all right, we need to go up with a behavior change plan because it's the whole thing, right? So
yeah, I mean, I think about like Fiverr when he was like, I got him at 4 months old. So he was probably in a fear phase when I got him. Plus he was transitioning into an adolescent dog. And he also lived out in the country and then he came to Oakland, California. So it was like, 2 wildly different environments. And like, he was afraid of fire hydrants. He was afraid of doodles. He was afraid of like a ton of stuff. And some of this stuff is genetic in terms of like his anxiety and his fear and his like, aggression towards dogs, or his selectivity towards dogs, I should say. But these were all things that I'm like, okay, I noticed this. Never really made a huge deal out of the fire hydrant. I would go interact with the fire hydrant sometimes if we were just passing by, but I wasn't like, you have to love fire hydrants. Like, it's not a big deal. It's a fire hydrant. Who cares? And then the thing with the doodles is like, all right, well, like, cool, whatever. I know you're going to have a lot of access to like other dogs and seeing other dogs. Like, you're just having a moment. Like, I'm just going to move on. Now, if it becomes a regular pattern, like you're saying, like German Shepherds, Fiverr, for whatever reason, vehemently hates German Shepherds, and it is a sight unseen thing. And he's that thing over there. And so that became a like, okay, this is like something that needs to be addressed and that I need to actually work on. Everything else was like, yeah, we'll come back at it later, right? As he was developing and growing. And these are things that in terms of like why we're talking about this now in terms of like what things affect behaviors. We already talked about genetics and fulfillment and, health and all of that. And then sometimes it's just the development period doesn't go as planned, or it's going to throw you for a loop. And some of the best things you can do is just go, oh, that's interesting. Yeah. All right. And then move on. And if it happens more than 3 or 4 times, you're like, nah, I think this is something I actually now have to focus on.
Yeah. Like brain blips are normal. So if your adolescent dog does something that has never happened before, don't panic. Just back off a little bit, give it a week or 2, and then see if they're back to normal. And if they're not and it happens again, then you need a plan, right? Because if you keep letting it happen, guess what? That's going to become a predictable behavior pattern. So
they grow into it.
And I'm going to give a couple examples. One is like if you do let your dog go off leash, and say your dog up to 5 months old has listened really, really well, and you trust them, and you're like, oh, their recall's so good, and then hormones enter the picture, and adolescence enters the picture, and they're like, oh, everything else is so much more interesting than you. Yes. All of a sudden, your puppy stops listening. So if your puppy stops listening, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get them a very long leash, and I'm going to hang on to the end of the long leash, and I'm not going to let you off leash until you prove that you have brain cells again. And when you are listening while I'm holding the leash, then I will proceed to letting you drag the leash, as long as you can continue to prove that you have brain cells. If at any time you are dragging the leash and you stop listening, I go back to holding the leash. So I'm not letting you get in a pattern of just doing whatever you want and blowing off your recall.
Yeah.
The other one that I think shows up a lot for me, and I'll see what you think about this, is my dog was really social. They were loving daycare. They were loving the dog park. And now they're starting to hump, or they're starting to get into fights with other dogs, and I don't know what to do. So a lot of people will just keep going.
I know.
Then you get in a pattern of, like, now you have a dog that's got into a pattern of fighting with other dogs. Or they're just really over-aroused and humping other dogs. So what do you do? Well, maybe let's back off the dog park. And if you do plan to get your dog neutered, once they are neutered, it's probably safe, if they're still feeling that happy about other dogs, to go back to that environment once the hormones are out of the picture. But your dog can still socialize with friends in a less stimulating environment with dogs that you know are safe. Because the dog park can be like a little bit of the Wild West, and daycare, not all daycares are created equal, but sometimes they're pretty high arousal, right? Lots of dogs can get stressed in daycare. They can get overstimulated. And a lot of adolescents just need a bit of a break for a while. Like, we recommend that a lot. We're like, okay, things are changing. We're going to need to have, this dog take a little break until they do get snip, snip. And then they come back after they're neutered and they're totally normal. But again, if they're going through that, like, hormonal swing, and you're still, like, expecting them to behave like a juvenile, it's not going to be the same, because hormones will sometimes kind of either make other dogs target them, or they make them start to try to, feel full of themselves, and maybe they're getting into some feisty behavior and starting to try to pull rank and stuff and get in themselves in trouble.
I think that an apt way of or how I have related it to clients and for the show as well would be, 13-year-old boys can grow mustaches, but nobody would say a 13-year-old boy is an adult man. And your adolescent dog is the same. I was a good, quiet kid, and largely was a good, quiet kid even through high school. But I still took opportunities when I was in middle and high school to take advantage of the systems that were in place for me. That means pushing boundaries. That means staying out late. That means breaking rules. It is a normal part of development. The only difference really here is that your dog doesn't speak English or Spanish or whatever language it is that you're teaching them in. So their social constructs aren't the same as our social constructs. So they're just pushing boundaries in a normal, natural way, because it is in all of us inherently to do so. And, the difference between your dog and, say, a teenager that is going to high school is that our society is built around language, and therefore we have language and rules already in place. That's our management. Our management is be in class on time or get written up. That is our management. Or we'll tell your parents, or we have, the legal system, or whatever it is. Our dog's management system is that long line if they're blowing off recall, the crate if they're chewing on furniture or getting into the food because they finally discovered how to jump on the counter. That is the social construct, or the boundaries that we're going to set on them so they can't continue to practice that behavior. But the big thing is to remember, just because they are starting to look like an adult does not mean that they are an adult.
Yes.
Nobody would say that a 13-year-old boy who has a mustache is a man, because they're not.
It's also, like, not super normal social behavior for dogs, like, kind of once they start to go through sexual maturity, to interact with a whole bunch of strange dogs. Like, I think that's something not a lot of people understand, and some dogs might maintain that, but some dogs might not. Like, it is really like a juvenile thing. They might outgrow it. I do find this is going to segue nicely into our next developmental phase. When we have dogs in daycare, if they do kind of maintain through adolescence the sociability, most dogs, once they hit 2 to 3, they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I'm not here for the mosh pit. I have outgrown this. And it's like, a lot of dogs at that age, like, it's not even that they don't like other dogs. They're just like, I'm way too good for this. And they want to socialize in different ways. So
Yeah.
that
Same with us.
Yeah, that 2 to 3 years old we've brought up a few times, and that's kind of like your transition into maturity or adulthood. And
Yes.
the change in sociability is really, really normal to see there. So like some dogs will just be like, I'm not really into this roughhousing with all these random dogs thing anymore. They might still like to meet dogs, but then maybe they're like, okay, I'm not going to wrestle. Like my dogs that are adults, like they're interested in meeting other dogs, but they really only, for the most part, play with dogs that are part of their household. Like Brew doesn't really play with random dogs. Tina's like absolutely not. Will still will. Like she likes puppies. She's a puppy. She's a good puppy trainer. But like other mature females, no, thank you. We will introduce ourselves and we will go our separate ways. She does like some other males, but it's dogs that she's gotten to know. Like they've obviously interacted repeatedly, right? So they're kind of in her friends group. Other dogs can become even like dog selective. So that means that they're going to be like even edging towards aggressive, where they're like overcorrecting some dogs because they're just tired of pushy, rude dog behavior. And some dogs can even switch into being even more dog aggressive.
Yes. So you're saying that at any given point in a dog's life, things will change.
Sorry,
I meant that as sarcasm. It's the same with us, honestly. Yes. So like, I mean, my dogs are all different ages. I've got a 12-year-old, an 11-year-old, or maybe I'm giving them extra years, but they're up there, and then 5 or 7, and they've all gone through different developmental periods. And again, I'm going to run it back to human beings. Like we are the same. When I was in kindergarten, everybody was my friend. When I got to middle school, it got a little clickier and not everybody was my friend. I didn't haul off and go punching people that I didn't know or didn't like because we have social constructs that we were raised with. But you know, it just became a little bit smaller.
Now I'm 40 and I don't like anybody. So that's
now I'm 40 and I hate everybody. No, now I'm 40 and I have a lot of good acquaintances, but the amount of people that I would call up randomly to go grab a cup of coffee or go play a video game with, that list is very short, right? It's within my immediate circle. I've got about 3 people that I'm like, hey, what are you doing right now? I want to go hang out. Everybody else is like, if we happen to be going to the same place, like, yeah, awesome. I go to flyball tournaments. I meet a bunch of people. Like I'm social and I'm friendly, but I wouldn't consider everyone my friend, if that makes sense. And that is normal and natural. If you are somebody who is in their 40s and has a 500 friend list that you regularly maintain and talk to all those people, that is amazing. You are an outlier.
I was going to say, to be fair, extroverts exist. I think both of us are on the introvert scale. So like social situations that are overstimulating do not recharge me. Like I need that alone time. And
for sure,
my job is very overstimulating. I need a lot of alone time. So like I want to spend my social time with people that I really can be myself around. Extroverts do exist, and they exist.
They do. I commend you. I would say, though, that somebody who has 500 friends that they regularly interact with on a regular basis, like that, you're an outlier, and that's amazing. Keep doing that if you're comfortable with that. But on that point, nobody would say that you or I, as introverts, are antisocial because we don't want to be out every night hanging out with people. They just call us introverts.
Maybe an extrovert might say that, but you know, it's very different. They get energy from those interactions, and for me, it drains me. So
100%. All I'm saying is that sometimes when people have that dog who has developmentally changed, they will come to us as dog trainers to be like, my dog has become aggressive. And it's like, no, your dog's social needs have changed. I'm 40. I don't want to go to a rave. That doesn't make me antisocial. That just makes me somebody who's 40 and doesn't want to go to a rave. Like, that's all that is. So, like, that's something to kind of keep in mind, that these are all normal developments within all species. So,
and then there's a lot of really good stuff that happens at that 2 to 3 years. Like, we kind of already touched with that. Like, I'm always coaching my clients. I'm like, 2 to 3 years old, like, you're going to see the benefits of all this hard work. And the clients that I really have the benefit of like working with them long term, they're like, oh yeah, you're right. Actually, he turned 3 and it was like something just clicked in his brain. And I'm like, see, all that hard work that we've done now comes to fruition. What did I tell you? So a lot of good stuff really happens like all of that hard work that you put in really comes into play. They start to be able to have better impulse control, make better choices on their own. But it takes until like 3 years old. The other change.
Not every dog. You do get some outliers. 5 didn't slow down or become really mature until he was about 4.5, almost 5 years old. So, but so that 2 to 3 mark is what we're aiming for generally as the consensus or the normal expectation. But you will have outliers from that too. So
another change that I see around that age is like dogs that have maybe been like showing inklings of territorial behavior or like that defensive aggression. That's where they really come into it. So like a dog like Quill, where I noticed it and I managed it, now she's like, okay, I still have this instinct, but I understand who's a threat. I understand who's not a threat. And I can understand when my mom is welcoming people into my home, whereas before she didn't have the impulse control, so it was just like wow, over arousal.
Yeah.
But sometimes you'll start to see dogs that like they get more serious about it. So you do have to watch for that. And the other thing that you can have is if you have multiple dogs in a home, you can start to see changes in the social dynamics, right?
Yes.
So you might start to have a dog that hits 3 years old start to kind of like maybe there might be some conflicts with an older dog that wasn't there before because they're like, well, now I'm mature, so I'm going to, maybe try to move up and rank a little bit on certain things. So
it'll happen in adolescence too. If you have an older dog, especially same sex, an older dog, as that younger dog going into adolescence, you'll see a lot of conflict depending on your breed potentially, and you'll see it more often with same sex dogs of the same gender. Right. So.
Let's talk about our oldies because, my goodness, I love them. Mine is snoozing on my lap right now. He's made a few half-awake appearances as I'm adjusting him.
My little beans are over there. Archer, why do you look so awkward?
I mean, I think a lot of people are familiar with the concept that dogs do get old. But what a lot of people don't recognize is, like, some of the behavior changes that come with that.
Yes.
And like some of the things that I really notice that I get a lot from people that they don't pick up on is like 6, 7, 8, 9, the hearing's changing and the dog is developing sound sensitivity. That's really common. Like you're hearing,
or they're blowing off the recall suddenly. So it goes both ways. Yeah.
Another thing is like an older dog that all of a sudden starts to become intolerant of being handled or like snappy or showing aggression. That's probably because there's some pain somewhere, right?
Yeah, which we talked in depth on our last show. So,
and sound sensitivity can also be linked to pain, right? So that can be another reason why an older dog starts to have noise sensitivity. You can also start to see some cognitive declines and cognitive changes, which can lead to like an increase in anxiety, like maybe they're a little bit more clingy. You might start to notice they having issues being left alone because they don't understand why their senses are changing. And then they start to get like clingy to you because they're like, my faculties are changing and I don't understand. And then incontinence is also quite normal. So these are kind of things that like I get a lot where people are like, oh, my 10-year-old dog, like all of a sudden is peeing. When I leave them alone, I think it's separation anxiety, but maybe it's not. Maybe they're just physically having troubles holding their bladder.
Or they just simply don't remember. Like, I know from personal experience, my first dog, when he was really going downhill, he jumped off the couch and walked across the living room and lifted his leg and peed on the record cabinet. Made no attempt to go outside. This is like the cleanest dog I've ever had. Made no attempt to tell me that he needed to go outside. He just didn't realize what he was doing. He was just like, I gotta go pee. I'm gonna go pee over here.
Or like, if like I know with Dexter, like he just doesn't know when he has to go, right? So
yes, that too, yeah.
That's really normal and it's physiological. There's not really much you can do about it behaviorally. So a lot of issues with senior dogs. The other one is like the senior dog starting to become cranky towards other animals in the house. Well, guess what? When you're 90, you're probably going to be cranky too. They might be painful, but also they're old, they're tired. Like let them have their space. Is there like anything else that you see with seniors as far as behavior?
Yes. One thing that I want to note is regression in behavior. So there's a lot of triggers for that, like pain and cognition and so on and so forth. But one of the things that I kind of, because this is something that has happened with my own personal dogs as they get older, is if you vaguely remember that your dog had a behavior problem when they were like a puppy or in their adolescence, there's a strong chance potentially that might come back into play depending on how much they got to practice that behavior, that it might come back in their elder years. So if you have a dog who, like you were saying, Quill's kind of territorial, so her territorialness could potentially increase when she reaches an elderly age. I had a dog who bit people, and he did, like, we didn't really change because I didn't get into dog training until much later, so we didn't work on any of his behaviors until he was almost 7. And then when he was great. You could literally get, like, kids were picking him up and blah, like things I would not be doing with him now, but like kids were picking him up, like I trusted him with complete strangers, blah, blah, blah. And then when he turned 13, those behaviors came back. And yeah, there was probably a really clear trigger of like he was in pain and stuff, but that behavior came back.
Yeah.
He became an ankle biter again. He was biting me. He was biting friends. He was biting people that he had relationships with. It was basically like he was, 4 years old again and being those. So you'll see sometimes potentially, depending on how often they got to practice those behaviors, a regression in those behaviors. If you combated separation anxiety and then when they were a little bit younger, you're probably going to see that return as they get older. That was the case with Floyd. We didn't work on his separation anxiety until he was almost 9 years old. Did great, could move anywhere with that dog. And then he got to be about 16, 17 years old, which is pretty amazing for a dog with pulmonic stenosis, which is a heart condition. And all of that separation anxiety came back full force. The shaking, the panting, and it wasn't a training issue. It was literally just him being a senior dog. So
I want to tell a quick story about how Dexter developed separation anxiety as a senior dog, because I think it's really interesting and kind of like also shows how dogs can sometimes develop separation anxiety out of the blue. I have also a Lynx story that I think I'd like to just bring up too, because it just happened and it was really interesting. So Dexter, I already said when he was kind of like 7 years old, his hearing started changing and he started getting sensitive to loud noises. Like he had never had that issue in his whole life. And we were living in New York at the time. And so like if we were home and there were storms and things, he was fine. Like he could come to us for comfort and he was okay with that. And he, at that time, was fine being left alone. Like, he never had separation anxiety his whole life. But I was out for work, and we had a particularly, like, violent storm season this summer. And so he was home alone, and there was, like, really intense storms a couple of times. And that was enough of, like, him to pattern, when I'm alone, it's scary. And that turned into separation anxiety that I still am kind of working on today. Like he still is more anxious. I can leave him. We have a pattern, but he still doesn't like it. And it was from the sound sensitivity. And I've dealt with other dogs that were younger that had like something like that kind of triggered the separation as well.
Yeah. Fiverr's actually going through that right now too. And I am concerned about it developing into other issues. Because he does seek me out, which I'm grateful for, because he could, considering his dog selectivity, he could choose to redirect it on another dog, which would not be out of the realm of normal for him. So for him to like seek me out and climb up on me or find a small space to like go into. So, and I do get concerned leaving him here because I cannot control the noises, and we live next to a pretty busy freeway and a pretty busy train station. So right now it's just really loud, sharp noises like fireworks, or, if a ladder drops in a space, he gets kind of like antsy, but yeah.
So the other story that I want to tell, it's not necessarily development phase, but I think it kind of wraps up the whole like why dogs develop behavior issues with like something that was sort of unexpected. Okay. So I have one of my employees, I want to say about a month ago, she was like, hey, I'm having this problem with my dog. She goes outside in a pen that's like attached to the back of the house, and that's kind of where she stays when they're not home because she's happier outside. And all of a sudden, the dog was panicking and like digging and frantically trying to get into the door, and like digging it so much that her feet were bleeding and the door was getting damaged. So they were just kind of like at a loss of what to do. And I was like, well, something must have happened. Like, it's not normal for a dog to be comfortable outside her whole life and then all of a sudden start to show this like frantic behavior. So we went through a whole bunch of stuff and couldn't figure anything out. I was like, get a camera outside, And then like kind of what we did to stop the behavior is basically just block that area and give her a really nice, cozy spot to go. And that fixed the problem. But what happened is she just found out that her neighbor snuck an ultrasonic bark device on their porch. So right when she told me this, I was like, that's why she started doing that. I said, I will bet money that is what made her start panicking outside. So I was like adding that to my list of like, the dog suddenly starts panicking in the yard. Somebody's planted an ultrasonic bark device. But yeah, that was pretty wild. And she was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that was probably about the right timing too. So they're obviously not happy with their neighbors. But I just thought that was pretty interesting. So like it made me think about, because I think a lot like if the dog suddenly starts having issues, maybe there's sounds that they're perceiving that we don't know about. And she said that like some certain Bluetooth stuff can emit a frequency that bothers dogs. Yep. People will use those like ultrasonic pest deterrents, so it could be something like that. But yeah, in this case, they had Actually planted it in their yard, which is pretty sneaky. But
Fiver's really sensitive to, I think they're called stink bugs. I've never had one emit a smell even after I've killed it, so I don't know what they are, but I think they make a noise that I can't hear because he knows it's in the house and he starts to freak out. And if I can't help him figure it out, he goes into Cooper's crate, which is like half his size. So yeah, those are things that we definitely have to pay attention to. But there's those things that are like training issues or management issues, and we suss it out if they're outside of the norm of the development that we expect. And then most of these things, your puppy is going to be a biter and you need to manage it. And your adolescent teen dog is going to, definitely be way more interested in the outside environment than you, and they're going to blow you off because they think they know everything and is a part of normal social development. And you need to manage it along with training. And yes, it is normal for your dog to have less dog friends as they age, and even less people friend, depending on the breed, and then when they become a senior, you're going to see more developmental changes where they'll either regress or they physically can't hold their bladder anymore. And these are also normal things to be expected. Always reach out to a trainer if you feel like you need help assessing that, and always talk to your vet as well, especially if we suspect it might be a physical thing. I'm sure that we could talk for hours and hours and hours on this with tons of anecdotes and personal stories, but I think that's a good way to wrap it up. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
No, I think that was good. I'm sure there's other stuff that will come up eventually, but hopefully people will bring us questions and we can kind of bring up a discussion thread. I'd be happy to do that. My brain is tapped out. I can't think of anything else, so I'm happy to.
Yeah, this is probably one of our longest episodes so far. So, all right, how can people get in touch with you, Sarah?
So you can find me. My website is www.bnrbc.ca, and that's a really good way to get in touch because it has sort of like all of our services and stuff on there, and you can find my email there. You can also find me on social media. So I have my personal profile, but also have a business profile, which is Barks and Recreation Pet Services. We're on Instagram as well. I'm on TikTok, but we're not really super active there yet. Email is probably the best way. How about you?
You can reach me at dognamics.com, DOGN as in Nancy, AM as in Mary, ICS.com. You'll get links to all the social media stuff that I have on there as well. And then I'm pretty sure in the next few episodes, we will start to like plug ways that people could get in touch with Get Your Sit Together. Yeah. We don't have huge social media platforms for that just yet, but we will be rolling that out soon, hopefully, before the end of the year. And then
I forgot about my online school because I just started it. So I have an online group coaching program now. So like anybody anywhere can sign up as a member, and like I'm doing like online courses and live broadcasts, which is beautiful. What I'm going to do after this. That is like just for members. Plus there's a whole bunch of free resources if you just want to go check it out. That is 2 Paws Up, and it's 2pawsup.circle.so is the website for that.
Nice. Should be, I'll be on top of doing like link dumps for the podcast and show notes and stuff. So we'll get all those links together. My stuff is not as robust, but if you're in the Portland, Oregon area, awesome. And I do offer online sessions if you need that as well. Feel free to reach out. I think that'll do it for us today. And,
Thanks for tuning in to Get Your Sit Together. We hope you and your pup learned something new today. Until next time, keep those tails wagging and training fun.
Bye.
Yeah, it was interesting that they did that. So it's like it also records on what it said was, I think I sent that to it also records on my computer, which will give it better quality.